All right. If everyone who can would mute themselves if you have noise in your home or go to a quiet room, whichever works for you. Good morning. And our presenter today is a stockbroker who happens to be blind. And Richard Crawford became a stockbroker in 1976 and retired from R.W. Baird in, make sure I don't get it wrong, 2017. So I had a little interesting small world way of contacting Richard. I heard him speak at an NFB convention years ago. And when I was back in Nebraska visiting, a childhood friend of mine's husband happened to mention his investment person. And he said, I don't know why I didn't tell you about this before. He's a blind guy. And I said, well, who is that? I'm looking for a safe place to invest. So we had an appointment and in Sioux City, Iowa. And that's how I got back in contact with Richard. So with that, I'll let Richard give you his background and how he got to where he is today. Welcome, Richard.
Good morning. Hope you all can hear me okay.
Yes.
I will assume so because you should be muted so that we don't have background conflicts. Thank you, Diane, for inviting me to come and share with your group today. My goal is to share with you my life story because in hindsight, now that I'm 70, it has been a wonderful life. And it's up to each one of us to write our own story. As you face and learn about blindness, you have to make your life the picture that you want it to be. I'm fortunate that I have been married to Sarah for 38 years. We're blessed to have 3 children. I have a daughter, 45, a son, 37, and a son, 36. 2 granddaughters, one 19 and one 9. And my family has been a true blessing and inspiration to me, and I hope you can say the same. I grew up in a small town in central Iowa called Grinnell, where my mom and dad were married at 15 and 16, had my brother 2 months after they were married, so he was 7 months premature. No, only kidding. And they were 17 and 18 when I was born. Early on, my folks started seeing that I wasn't seeing very good, especially at night and moving objects. They had my eyes checked, and doggone if I didn't come down with retinitis pigmentosus, in which some of you probably have that disease, or most all of us at least have heard of it. And by age 10, I was legally blind, and they decided, with a lot of thought, to send me off to the Iowa Braille and Sight Saving School in Vinton, Iowa. I didn't like that. I didn't adjust very well. I was pretty darn ornery, and I got in a lot of trouble. I used to think my grades of D and F were just fine. I told my mom F was for fantastic, but she didn't agree with me on that. And after 5 years at the School for the Blind in the 9th grade, they kicked me out because I was in so much trouble all the time. And I said, I don't care. I'll just go to public school. Well, the School for the Blind said, well, good luck. You won't make it. And what they were really saying to me is they didn't educate blind kids to the same standards of sighted kids. They didn't say that in so many words, but that's what they were implying when they said, you won't make it. So I adopted an attitude that has held me in incredibly good stead over the years, because at that time, when they said I couldn't make it, I took an attitude: if you don't think I can do something as a blind guy, hide and watch. Hide and watch, and you'll see what I can do. And from that point on, my life started turning around. I realized that I couldn't go out and get a job like everybody else because I was blind. I couldn't have the same opportunities that everybody else had because I was blind. So I knew I had to turn to education as my key for me personally, if I were wanting to make a good life for myself. So with the attitude of hide and watch is how I have spent the rest of my life, working hard and doing the things that I could do. When I first was going to go to public school, for the first time and the only time in my life, I begged. I had to beg the superintendent of the school in Grinnell to let me go to school there. Now, you have to remember, this is way back before we had all the stuff that we have today for blind people and other handicapped people. There were no IEPs. There were no teacher's aides. There was no system to let handicapped kids be integrated into this public school system back in those days. I had to get my own books ahead of time. I had to make arrangements to get them read on, back then it was 8-inch reel-to-reel tape. You young people don't even know what that is. It was before cassettes and before all the technology of today. But I had to convince the superintendent to just please let me try. Now, some of us who have siblings understand they didn't really want me because they'd had my older brother. He was not a model student either. But, like I say, my only time I ever begged, and the superintendent said, all right, we can try. The first 9 weeks in public school, I went from making D's and F's to making the honor roll. Folks, it was so easy, I never did it again. And I was a good student. I got C pluses and B's, but I didn't work quite hard enough at education as I should have, but I did do something that I think really helped me throughout my life, and that's I started getting involved with other things. It's important as a blind person that we don't sit at home. I got involved in choir, play practice in the musicals. I got involved in wrestling, school politics. Ended up being president of my senior class of about 170 kids. And through that experience of getting into doing things that were not just my own little circle, it helped me develop as a person to teach me life skills to live in a sighted world. Because like it or not, even though we're stuck in blindness, the world around us functions in sighted world. One of the things that I learned in play practice one time, it was a cold January day, and we'd had play practice, got done that night, and I was standing by the front door, and the kids were coming out, and they were running, jumping in the cars, and not one of those kids asked if I needed a ride. And I got feeling pretty sorry for myself because I thought, well, the kids really don't like me. And after I thought about it, I just decided, well, heck with it, I'll just walk home. Well, thank goodness it was only 6 blocks to my house because it was close to 20 below zero, and I thought I was going to freeze before I got home. And when I got home, my dad looked at me and says, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Dad, the kids don't like me." He says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Dad, I stood by the door and the kids came out and they all got in their cars and went home, and not one person offered to give me a ride, and it's cold out." And my dad did one of the best things he ever did is he looked at me and he said, "I don't want you ever coming home to me crying again if you didn't ask." He said, "Did you ask for a ride?" And I said, "No, they know I'm blind and can't." He said, "Did you ask?" I said, "No." He said, "Don't ever cry again if you don't get what you need because you didn't ask." And what a good life lesson that was for me, because I got to tell you, it doesn't happen in the rest of my life. If I need something, I'm assertive enough that I went and got it, figured out how. As we finished in high school and I was involved with wrestling, I would generally win about 19 matches a year and maybe lose 6. So it was a great sport for blind people. I got involved with the school politics, as I said, and after serving on student council and other things, it was a real honor to be president of my senior class. As I finished up high school, I went off to the Iowa Department for the Blind. And that's kind of what I think some of you are involved in now. It's where in Iowa we did rehabilitation and met other blind people. And I had the pleasure of being a student of Dr. Jernigan's. Now, if you've never heard or read about Dr. Jernigan, I'd highly recommend that you go to a website, nfb.org, and you can find in there some of his speeches, because I will tell you, in my opinion, Dr. Jernigan has done more, or did more, he's deceased, did more to help blind people in the world than probably any other one person. Now, Louis Braille was pretty good. He invented Braille, and we know that. And if you don't use Braille and if you can't see, I highly recommend that you pay the price and practice to learn Braille. Now, Braille is not very tough. People, especially sighted professionals, have a tendency to say, well, Braille's hard. Well, Braille's not hard, folks. A 10-year-old kid invented it. How hard can it be? Now, does it take practice to learn to read? It sure does. But what a concept that is. So after I went to the Department for the Blind, I then decided to go to college at Wartburg, a private Lutheran school here in Iowa. And the wrestling coach from the Grinnell College had just gone up to Wartburg to be the wrestling coach up there, and he recruited me to go there and wrestle. I did that and had a lot of fun for 2 of the 3 years that I went to college. I didn't wrestle the 4th year because I went through college in 3 years with 2 majors and a minor. So I was pretty full-time student, and I knew I wasn't going to wrestle for a living. So college education was important to me, and I did that and majored in business administration and business education. I was the first of our family to ever go to college and the first to ever graduate, so it's been kind of an honor for me to do that. And so I graduated with degrees in business administration and business education and elementary ed minor. I got my first job within about 60 days after graduating from college. I I started in January of 69 and graduated in December of 71. That seems like 2 years if you just look at the dates, but it's a full 3 years. I worked in the summers and had summer jobs and went to school all summer. That's why I went through so quickly, and I do not recommend that because in hindsight, college was one of the most fun times of our lives, and I shortened my experience by going through so fast and hard. But if I wouldn't have done that, my entire career line would have probably been altered, and I would not have had the incredibly wonderful life that I have had. So I got married at age 18, midnight New Year's Eve, 1969, and started college 4 or 5 days later. And after I graduated from college, I got my first job as assistant director of a 4-county community action agency. And for those of you who don't know what community action is, we sponsored programs for the elderly, minorities, and youth. We were the beginning agency in the government that started things like Head Start, Meals on Wheels, energy winterization program, neighborhood youth corps for kids. Those types of programs got their start out of the community action agencies. And they hired me right out of college to be the assistant director, and which I don't know how or why they did that, but I guess it's because I learned how to sell myself. And when I met with the board of directors and the young man who was hired to be the executive director, they saw in me the ability to lead and administer, and so they gave me that opportunity. And what a wonderful, wonderful place to start. I did that for about 1.5 years, and then I saw that there was an opening in Woodbury County, Sioux City, Iowa, for the executive director job of the Woodbury County Community Action Agency. Same agency, just a different part of the state. So lo and behold, I applied. They said they'd like to interview me, so I hitchhiked from Belle Plaine, Iowa to Sioux City, which is about 280 miles, and met with the board of directors there. Their director had resigned, and so they were without a director. Met with them, and once again, apparently I sold them on the idea that I could run that agency for them. So at age 23, they hired me to be the executive director. And I've got to tell you, as I look back, I didn't know squat at 23, but man, was I happy to have the opportunity. And we had about 60 people, $1 million worth of budgets back then, and it was another wonderful opportunity to work and achieve in that space. Well, I mentioned I hitchhiked to Sioux City for the job interview. When I got the job, I then started hitchhiking to work every day. And in the fall of 1975, I had the opportunity to be the local chairman of the Jerry Lewis Muscular Dystrophy Telethon. For those of you who may remember, Jerry Lewis every Labor Day had his big telethon to raise money for muscular dystrophy. And so I was hitchhiking after that. I was hitchhiking to work one day, and a guy picks me up and says, "Hi, Rich Crawford." And I said, "Hi," and we visited a little bit. And I said, "I don't recognize who you are." And he said, "Well, we've never met." And I said, "Well, how do you know me?" And he said, "Well, you're pretty visible in Sioux City, where I lived at the time. So I see you're on the board of directors of a number of different agencies. You're involved in JCs and Kiwanis and Lions, and board of directors of the Boys Club. I just saw you on the Jerry Lewis Muscular Dystrophy Telethon raising money. So you're pretty visible in our town, and your name came up as somebody that we might want to talk to about a career in the stock brokerage industry." Well, as you can tell, I'm pretty quiet and shy, so When I got to my office, I'm saying that jokingly, by the way, I got to the office and I looked him up in the city directory, and by golly, he was a stockbroker. So I called and said, hey, this is Rich Crawford. Were you BSing me about looking at a career in your industry? And the manager said, no, we were serious. And so I interviewed with him. And after I passed the first set of interviews at the local level, they sent me up to Minneapolis to the national, or to their headquarters. And I met with their people and spent an entire day of interviews with their executives. And they even sent me to an industrial psychologist who did a bunch of testing to see if I had the aptitude, as they called it back then. And if you've been blind and never gone on a job interview, you know how it goes. At the end, they say, well, we'll let you know. And I thought to myself, I think I just wasted airfare and hotel fare and a day of my life for nothing. Thanks a lot. But when I got home the next day, they called and said, Rich, we'd like to give you the opportunity to work with us. And I said, well, let me think about it. And about 5 seconds later, I said, okay. And I made a choice to leave the safety of government employment to go to an industry that was not thought of for blind guys, to an industry that was 100% commission sales. And I dove off the deep end. And it ended up being 41 years of mutually beneficial to the company, to my clients, and to myself. Because I started as a stockbroker in January of 1976, as Diane said, and I managed money for clients in 27 states over the years, 5 countries, and we learned that being a stockbroker was not just sales, but it was managing relationships. And if you don't take care of Grandpa, you don't get a shot at his kids and grandkids, because we were doing business with 4th and 5th generation family members when I retired in 17. And my team is still working. I'd hired 2 young men to work for me, and they did for 22 years before I retired, and they've taken over my practice now. And they're still making me and Diane and all of our other clients good money on managing our assets for us. I developed clients because I was willing to call and share ideas when I would hitchhike to work. Guess who drove to work that same time I was hitchhiking to work? Other businessmen and women, right? I'd get in the car and they'd say, hey, what's the stick for? And I said, I'm blind. I said, well, if you're blind, what are you doing hitchhiking? I said, well, do you want me to drive? And of course, by the time I got downtown, I knew their name. I knew where they worked. 3 days later, I'd call them and say, hey, John, this is Rich Crawford. You gave me a ride the other day. I was just called to see, do you ever do any investing? And that's how I opened up tons of accounts, just because I was out there hitchhiking to work. In our industry, I had the pleasure to become a top producer. Earned lots of trips to wonderful places because of production goals that they always set for people in the sales organizations and stock brokerage business. So it was truly a career that was beyond my wildest dreams and expectations. But it took a lot of hard work, a lot of determination, and I couldn't have asked for a more challenging, wonderful career in a business that historically was not made for, thought of as something blind people did. So that's some of my background in history. I would like to see at this point if there's any questions. And then I'm going to share with you 6 things that I think made a major influence on how my life as a blind person turned out to be so cotton picking good. But before I go there, I want to see if anybody's awake. Because one of the disadvantages of being on muted phones, you don't get any feedback from people if they're snoring or eating lunch or whatever. So if we could take just a minute, and are there any questions to this point?
Before we while people get unmuted, I just want to point out, guys, that Richard is using Braille notes currently right now on this speech. And also when I gave him the meeting ID to call in, I heard him taking the number down with a slate and stylus. So Braille has been a big part of his life and career, as it is mine. Any comments or questions at this point, guys? Also, Rich, I noticed yesterday that it was a good thing that you mentioned some of your hobbies, sports-wise, hunting-wise, because there was a gentleman on the call that said, oh, I was going to give up snowboarding. Maybe I won't do that now. So maybe you might talk a little bit about that as well.
I will.
Great.
Well, I'll tell you that I was a little disappointed that nobody from the group yesterday has called or emailed me yet. I offered that. I offer it to you today also. And I am a free resource to people. Now that I'm retired, my job is to help other blind people who have questions and how do I do this, or what do you think about that? I don't have all the answers, but after being blind for 60 years and having what some think was an incredibly great career, I don't have all the answers, but I have a lot of them. And the really good news is I know so many successful blind people that if I don't have the answers, we can find the people that do. So before I'm done, I'm going to give you my email address and my cell phone number. And please feel free to call me one-on-one if I can be of any help to you or anybody else if you knows going blind. I mean, it's for those of you who are just starting this journey, it's got to be scary. I remember it was scary for me. All right. 6 things that I adopted in my life that I think really made a difference. 1, like yourself. Like who you are. It's okay to be blind. It's okay to be black. It's okay to be in a wheelchair. It's okay to be deaf. It's okay to be a man. It's okay to be a woman. But you have to like who you are, or you can't get me to like you. Having a good self-image and liking who you are is imperative to us. I always think of the man in the mental ward of the hospital standing on the end of his bed yelling out, "I'm Napoleon! I am Napoleon!" And the psychiatrist says, "Well, what makes you think you're Napoleon?" And the guy says, "God told me so." And the guy in the bed next to him said, "I did not." He had a good self-image. He thought he was God. Self-image is unbelievably important. Here's a little, this is a word picture. I want you to think of, how many of you know the story about I'm a Little Teapot? Well, my granddaughter, age 9, was over to my house the other day. And she said, Grandpa, I have a little jingle for you. I said, what is it? She said, I'm a little teapot, short and stout. Here is my handle. And when she did that, of course, you take your hand and you put it on your hip. And she said, here is my spout. And normally, when you do that, you put your other hand out of the 45-degree angle on your arm and your hand going up so it looks kind of like the teapot spout. So she said, here's my handle, here's my, and she put her other hand on her hip also, so it looked like there was 2 handles. And she got this funny look on her face. She said, well, let me try it again. I'm a little teapot, short and stout. Here's my handle, here's my, and she did the 2 handles again, not the spout. She said, well, let me do it again. I'm a little teapot, short and stout. Here's my handle, here's my, well, doggone it, I just must be a sugar bowl. It's okay to be a sugar bowl. It's okay to be a teapot. But you better like who you are and what you are. And if you don't, it's your job to change it. It's your job to make the difference. But it is vitally important that we have a good self-image. I was young and losing my sight, and I walked in the bathroom one day, and my brother was standing in front of me. He was older than I am by 2.5 years, and he was flexing his muscles. And I said, hey, conceit causes eye strain. He said, oh, is that why you're going blind? I said, no, that's not the response I was hoping to get out of him. All right, number 2. Change our weaknesses into strengths. What do I mean by that? We all have weaknesses, and we have to identify them and do whatever it takes to change it. I told you that I wrestled in high school. I won normally about 19 matches a year and lost 6. I pinned normally somewhere around 11. The sighted kids would think to themselves, hey, I'm wrestling a blind guy. This is going to be a cakewalk, and I would kick their butt. But I was the first kid in practice and the last to leave because I knew I had to make up the disadvantage of not being able to see to be in better conditioning so that toward the end of the match, I was still stronger than my opponents. And I won most of my matches in the last 30 seconds of a 6-minute wrestling match in high school. In fact, I earned the name Lucky because 2 times back to back, I pinned my opponent in 5:59 with only 1 second to go. The poor sighted kid looked up on the wall and he saw the clock was ticking down. He thought, oh, I got this made and it's not going to pin me. And he quit a little too early, and I didn't. So I turned my blindness from being a weakness from what most people would think of in a sport to an advantage. As I said, I hitchhiked to work. Now, I don't recommend that to anybody, especially today. But it worked for me. I remember one time I was hitchhiking to work. Well, actually, I was hitchhiking to a Kiwanis Club breakfast meeting. And this pickup pulls up, and I could tell by the sound that it was a pickup. I jumped in. I said hi to the guy. He doesn't speak. I think, man, this is odd. I tried again to get him to talk to me. It didn't work. And all of a sudden, the guy turns right, stops his pickup, mumbles, reaches across my body, and opens my door. I got to tell you, I might be blind, but I know when it's time to get out of somebody's truck. I can take a hint. So I got out, and I realized what had happened. The guy picking me up was a deaf mute. he couldn't hear me tell him where I wanted to go. I couldn't tell for sure where he let me off because it wasn't where at the end of the road that I was going down. And so I'm sure he went home to his wife and he signed her, honey, I don't know where this blind guy was going today that I gave a ride to, but he's probably still lost. But I just had to laugh because it was an interesting event, getting a ride with a deaf mute, and he didn't know where I wanted to go, and I didn't know where he was letting me off. One time I was hitchhiking back from Minneapolis, and this 85-year-old lady gives me a ride. I said, "Man, I appreciate the ride, but you shouldn't be giving hitchhikers a ride at 85. I said, "Why did you do that?" And she said, "Well, I asked God if I should give you a ride, and he didn't say no, so I just pulled over and gave you a ride." I said, "Well, that's a wonderful thing, but you need to do yourself a favor. The next time you ask God a question, please don't take silence as a yes." But it was a good ride, and I met the lady, and we kept in contact for years until she passed away, because I got her phone number and kept in contact with her. Number 3, try. The best 3-letter word you can ever learn or teach somebody is, are you willing to try something? I ski. I took up water skiing, snow skiing, downhill, cross country. I do a lot of walking, biking, both on tandem bicycles, and I also have a bicycle that is what's called a 4-wheeler, and it was really great, especially in the latter years, because it looks kind of like a miniature little car. It's got 4 wheels and has 2 seats that you sit side by side on. And each of the, if you've ridden a tandem, most tandem bikes, both pedals are in sync with each other. But with this 4-wheeler, each person's gears are independent of each other. So as my mom got older, her knees were bad and she couldn't really pedal, and I couldn't see to steer, but it worked out great because I kept it at my mom's house, and I'd get her on the bike and we'd ride up, she'd steer, and we'd ride up to town to get groceries or ride to congregate meals with her, and she got to be out and about, and we were able to still ride around and have a lot of enjoyment with riding bicycle built for 2 in the tandem setting. I also took up target shooting. You think, how is a blind guy target shoot? Well, how I did it was I took these musical cards that when you open, they play tunes, and I hung them up in the gun range, and I stood back and I shot them until they quit singing. I have a doctor friend who had a child that was born blind, and I was out to his place one day, and we were going to do some target shooting because I had this old Christmas bell that it played flat. I mean, always made yucky sounds. So we were going to go target shooting that day, and we set this Christmas bell out in the front of us, and he said, "Well, here, I've got a brand new pistol that I'd like to have you try." And I took his new Glock. I aimed at that sound of the bell. I pulled the trigger and hit it the very first time. He said, "How did you do that?" And I told him, "I don't know, Doc. But if your kid doesn't get out here, if he stays in the house, he'll never, ever learn. He'll never succeed." And after that, years later, my doctor friend told me what a wonderful thing for him to learn as a father with a blind child, that you can't let him sit at home. You got to let him do stuff. I used to pheasant hunt. I don't know if you've ever been around pheasants in the Midwest here, when they fly, they make a lot of noise. And I got to where I could hit a pheasant by sound. One time I was out hunting with a buddy of mine, and I accidentally shot a hen, and you're only supposed to shoot the roosters. And he said, what are you going to do if a game warden stops us? And I said, I don't think I care. He said, what do you mean you don't care? And I said, well, do you think a game warden's going to believe a blind man shot a pheasant, period? Let alone, I think this is your problem, not mine, if we get stopped by a game warden. I also took up deer hunting. My father-in-law was quite an outdoorsman. He said to me one time, he said, you ever got a deer? I said, yeah, I got your daughter. He said, no, I mean the four-legged kind of deer. I said, no, but I'm willing to try. How do you propose a blind guy shoots a deer? Are you going to put a bell on it and tie it to a stump, or what's the gig? He said, no. He said, I was thinking if we build us a big enough tree stand that I can stand behind you and look over your shoulder. Do you think you can hit something? I said, yep. I will hit the ground. I guarantee it. It will land somewhere. Well, November came, hunting season came. We'd done some practicing. We'd taken a TV box and set it out there about 60 yards and put a big black 9-inch circle on it. And we practiced to where, with my father-in-law's steady hand, with my steady hand and his good eye, we got to where we could hit that 9-inch target at 60 yards. And in Iowa, we have to hunt with a shotgun, not a high-powered rifle. That's the dickens of a good shot. So we're out there in November, cold, but no snow. And for the first time in my life, I was able to hear deer running through the woods, through the fields, because the leaves were still crunchy. I got to tell you, deer have an incredibly long stride when they're running. Sighted people have been enjoying it for years, but it was the first time for me to get the thrill of hearing deer running into our wooded area. So it was along about 11 o'clock, and he said, there's 2 deer coming our way, and the first one came into our wooded area and stopped. My father-in-law and I followed by sound, so I was kind of close. But he said, down to the left, fire. And I did. He says, you just got a deer. I said, you're lying to me. He said, nope, we really did. And we were both really excited. And I said, look, Dad, if we get down there and that sucker's got rigor mortis, I'm going to know that you set me up. Well, we got down there and it didn't have rigor mortis. And one of the best biology lessons I ever had, when you're a blind guy in school, remember, did you ever have to, when you were sighted, did you ever have to dissect cold formaldehyde frogs? Yuck. Well, when you field dress a deer that you just shot, it was the best bio lesson I ever had. But again, folks, it doesn't happen if you don't try. I love fishing, woodworking. I make birdhouses and bird feeders in my shop. I enjoy trying new things. Not too many years ago, the Big Brothers and Big Sisters organization in Sioux City were having a fundraiser. And I happened to have been on the very first Big Brothers, Big Sisters board of directors back in the 70s. And they called and said, hey, we're doing the rope rappelling off the top of the highest building in Sioux City. Would you consider doing that as part of a fundraiser for us? And I said, yeah, I'll try it. Well, I got to tell you, I got up on top of this 12-story building. And as I was putting my legs over the side of the building, it made me think of that country music song. What was I thinking? Because it was an experience. But you know what? It's like so many things in life. The worst part of rope rappelling off the top of a building or down a mountain is not the doing. It's the thinking about the doing. The thinking about how scary that was the hardest part. The physical doing of so many things in our life is not the tough part. You have to be willing to keep trying new things. My grandpa said, when you're green, you grow. When you're ripe, you rot. We don't want to rot. There's an interesting thing. When we try and succeed, it does something to our brain. It creates endorphins that fire in your head, and it causes almost a euphoric feeling. It's a high that is a natural high, not a man-made high. And it's exhilarating into your brain and fun. And so if you try and you succeed, guess what happens? You want to try something else. And if you succeed, you just keep trying, because that feeling of successful efforts is a wonderful feeling, and it makes us want to strive to try again. And I got to tell you, don't be afraid of succeeding. What did I just say? Don't be afraid of succeeding. You know, so many people are afraid of failure. But I got to tell you, I think a lot of people are afraid if they succeed, what happens? People expect you to succeed. Well, what a concept. What an idea. Are we willing to try? Number 4, dream. Can you dream about goodness? Can you dream about a job that you want? Can you dream about a spouse that you want? Can you dream about going to college? Do you challenge yourself to be able to dream? I remember as a kid, I peed the bed till I was 12. I used to dream about someday getting married and not peeing the bed. I used to dream about going to college. I was the first in our family to ever go to college, let alone graduate. I used to dream about, could I get a job someday as a blind guy? I used to think about, could I ever make $20,000 a year? And by the time I retired, I was paying over $20,000 a month in taxes. I used to dream about having a wife and a family. And my wife and I have been married 38 years, and we have 3 children. My wife said to me one time, Rich, you are a dreamer. But the difference, she said, was you work hard enough, get prepared well enough, that you make your dreams come true. Now, I want you to dream, but I don't want you to not follow through and do and be whatever it takes to make our dreams come true. Number 5, you have to work to be the best at whatever it is you decide you want to do in your life. You have to work to be the best. Now, that takes a lot of hard work sometimes, and sometimes it takes a lot of smart work sometimes. And I don't care what it is you want to do and be. Are you willing to give the time, give the energy to get yourself prepared and trained and ready to succeed? And that work ethic is one that stands you in good stead for your entire life. I know blind people that have gotten jobs, and after they finally got a job, they became very successful because they weren't just happy with an entry-level job. We don't want to just be making minimum wage all of our life. And if you strive to be the best at whatever it is you're going to do, it makes it a lot easier to get promoted and work up the ladder. You know, I heard him once say, if you shoot for the moon and you miss, you are still pretty darn high. So I want you to learn to shoot for the moon, and you will have a lot of success. Be reliable. Our people depend on you, whatever it is you're doing. Be honest. Our country is starving for honest, hardworking people. You can do that when you choose. The world is running by people who are on time, people that are dependable, and it should be by more people that are honest. Number 6. This is the last one, so I'm almost done. Do you love? Do you love your God? Do you love your family? Do you love your job, if you have one? I want you to prioritize our love in God first, family second, and our career, whatever it is, last. Too many times we spend too many hours at the office. You know, like when I had people say, well, when you're on your deathbed, nobody ever says, I wish I'd have spent more time at the office. But we sure do. Wish we'd maybe spent a little more time in church, a little more time with our family and grandkids. So love is an important part of happiness and success. Those are the 6 steps. Like yourself, change weaknesses to strength, try, dream, work to be the best, and love. Those things have been keys to my incredible, fun, successful, healthy life. Thanks a lot. I'd like to answer questions.
All right. Thank you, Richard. Everybody, feel free to unmute and give Richard any comments, thoughts, or questions that you may have.
I want to say thank you for sharing your successful story. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you for your comment.
Yeah. Thank you so much to share. And your first point for me was very important today. About like yourself, you know, sometimes I hate the fact to be blind. So
yes,
thank you so much for this motivation speak. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Glad you were here, Gracie.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, the good news, Gracie, is some of the fears and anxieties and frustrations that you have when you're first going blind, they do get better. So it's very normal to have some of those feelings. But when you have people like Diane and hopefully me and others, you need to get involved with the National Federation of the Blind. Because if you go to our state conventions and national conventions, what you do is you see incredible amount of blind people that are doing unbelievable things. It's just that we don't know it. Because
yes,
we're not
and we
around.
have a great pool of instructors at Society that are really good role models that she has met. And so, you know, that's right. The more blind people we know, the more we realize what's possible.
Well, the more blind people we know, the more we learn that me and all of the success I've had, it's really easy to think, well, man, I'm really super. I'm great. But I'm not. The only difference is I work harder than some people. But there's all kinds of blind people that you can find if you're willing to reach out, and we're available, and most of us are more than happy to share and help through the rough spots.
Anybody else have
Any
a
other
question?
comments?
I don't have a question. I have a comment. My name is Deborah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can.
Okay.
Thank you, Deborah.
So I have diabetic retinopathy. Like both my retinas fell off, and I couldn't see for a while. And they did a bunch of surgeries, and so going to Society of the Blind and the Low Vision Center, I learned that I'm 5% away from being legally blind. So before I went to Society of the Blind, when I couldn't see, I stopped living completely. Like I didn't read any books. I didn't do any paperwork myself except for to sign a signature. I locked myself basically in the house and did nothing. And it took, going to like a 12-step recovery program for other addiction issues to realize that I don't have to be like that. And what I started doing at first was carrying around a magnifying glass everywhere I went. And at first it was an ego thing and a pride thing that I didn't want to have to do that. I would just opt out of reading in public. And eventually I realized I was missing out on stuff and it wasn't okay. And so I got comfortable with the magnifying glass. And then, like I hadn't even tried, a pair of reading glasses. And when I went and tried a pair of reading glasses, I was amazed, even though I only have one good working eye and it's not that great. And there's blotches that, I can't see, the whole word will be like attend and I'll be missing letters, you know what I mean? But I can figure it out if I just move my head around a little. So I'm your thing about, not staying inside, just like hit my heart really hard because
Oh, thank you. And
I'm trying my best to do the things I need to do to be okay with what's happening because I don't know if my vision's going to get worse. So I'm taking life skills class and I'm taking the computer class with Society of the Blind and like listening to stories like yours, which is absolutely amazing. It just gives me so much hope. Like I can do this. I'm going to be okay. I don't have to be on disability for the rest of my life. Like I can get a job and I can, have an equal opportunity as someone who has full sight. And at once I let that be a death sentence to me and it's not that way anymore. So
wonderful.
I do want to, I can't wait until the school opens back up because I want to meet more, I want to meet more blind people. I want to figure out how things are done without vision. Like I'm having difficulties learning how to listen to a book rather than read it with my eyes. I mean, it's a process and I'm having a hard time. And also, learning how to use the cane, it's a prideful thing and it's an ego thing. And I'm having a hard time with that too. But I know I'm going to be okay. Like if you could do it from being a little kid and get where you got, like I'm going to be okay. You give me so much hope. So I just want to thank you so much for your story.
You are welcome. And one of the things that most of our agencies want to teach you is if you learn to do things with blind shades on, where you can't see anything, if you will pay the price and learn Braille skills and blindness skills as a totally blind person, then you take those off. You can do wonderful things, but you don't have to have the fear is, can I still do it if I can't see anything? And you can. That's the good news. Totally blind, you can still do the things you need to do if you're willing to pay the price and get yourself prepared and qualified, and then the doors open up for you.
Yeah, I as far as the Braille thing goes, I have neuropathy really bad, also due to diabetes and not taking care of myself when I was younger. So that's another issue, another hurdle that I have to cross as far as the cooking and the Braille and stuff like that. So we're figuring it out. We're trying to find the best technology that helps me because I can't feel my hands. So
You're in the right place, Deborah.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
David, the lights here don't work.
What was the question?
All right. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
Well, I'm real disappointed that neither today or yesterday, not one person asked, well, what'd you get kicked out of the school for the blind for?
What did you get kicked out for?
I'm not answering you, Diane.
I may know.
Thank you for letting me share with you. Let me give to all of you now my email and my cell phone numbers. And if you don't get it written down, Diane has it. You can get it from her. But my email is Richard, P is in Paul, Crawford, CRAWFORD, JR at gmail.com. My cell phone number is 712 898 4869. I do hope that you call or email me if I can be of any assistance to you whatsoever. I'm a free resource. I don't have to go to work anymore, and I've got lots of time on my hands, and I would love to share and be of help if there's any way I can do that. Thanks.
Thank you so much for talking to us today. And you guys feel free to reach out to Richard. Thank you very much, Richard.
Good day.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.
Uh-huh.
Okay, stop cloud recording.
All right.